Good evening, everybody. Pleased to say we are welcoming tonight Katrin Raynor-Evans. Katrin is a Fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society and the Royal Geographical Society. She is a regular contributor to the BBC Sky at Night and Gibbon's Stamp Monthly. Katrin has a regular weekly column for the All About Stamps and volunteers as a programme producer for Astro Radio. She is co-authoring her first book, and last year, Asteroid 446500, Katrin Raynor, was named after her. So can we please all put our hands up and welcome Katrin Raynor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello. Do you want me to get going?
Off you go, Katrin.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm not sure if you guys know Brian Jones. I'm co-authoring a book with him. Is he a member of Mexborough? He's a Yorkshireman.
I don't believe so.
You don't know him? Oh,
No.
I'll have to have a word with him.
But if you wish, please pass on our application form.
Yeah, I will do. I'll let him know. Okay, cool. So can you all see my screen?
We can.
We can.
Fantastic. I'm just going to turn my video off because I don't like having it on. So excellent. Okay. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I'm glad to finally be here. I was starting to get offended. I thought, oh no, they don't want me anymore. So it's great to finally be connected. And tonight I'm going to discuss what we can learn about astronomy through philately, and I'm going to show you some examples of what stamps exist globally celebrating the subject of astronomy. And this is a perfect example you can see here. It's one of my favorites, which was issued by the United States Postal Service in 2017 to celebrate the total solar eclipse that was seen in the US. And it was the first total solar eclipse seen along a very narrow path across the US since 1918. And it's actually one stamp, but the design is made of thermochromic ink, which means that when heat is applied, the color changes. So you can see here on the left-hand side, the moon is obscuring the sun. And you can see the sun's corona, which is the outermost part of the sun's atmosphere. And when heat is applied to the stamp by pressing a thumb or finger on it, the full moon appears, which you can see on the right-hand side. And this is actually a real photograph of a total solar eclipse taken in Libya in 2006. So the world of stamp collecting is a science and art in itself, and there are so many facets of the subject. This is just a brief introduction. I could talk for a week. So I've just chosen some subjects that I hope will interest you all, get you excited, and give you a flavour of what it's all about. So just to give you a quick slide on what you can expect this evening, I'm going to be talking about what I think is so great about philately. I'll give you a brief introduction to what philately is, because obviously, you know, some of you guys may not know what that is. I will give you a few examples of the world's first astronomy stamps and then the global spread of astronomy on stamps. Then I'm going to take a look at some astronomy stamps issued here in the UK. Then I'm going to look at how you might want to organise a astronomy and philately collection, and I've grouped those subjects. Then I'm one slide on the future, and then how to get started in collecting astronomy stamps if this does capture your attention and I inspire you. So yeah, I'll just be talking about that at the end. Okay, so what's so great about philately? Well, it's a really unusual and creative way of learning about history, geography, science, culture, politics, even animals and comic books, and of course, astronomy and space. There is literally a stamp for anything. So I just wanted to give you a few examples of some stamps that are out there. We have a stamp here that was issued in Egypt depicting hieroglyphs, and this was produced in 1986. And a set of 4 stamps issued in the UK celebrating the British weather was issued in 2001, and you can see that just one example there on the right-hand side. And there are even stamps with a dinosaur theme, and this is a really interesting branch of thematic philately called paleophilately. And here is a stamp celebrating chemistry, which was issued in Switzerland, and again it's another really interesting branch of thematic philately called chemophilately. And just another example here of music, hip-hop culture being celebrated on stamps that was issued in the US in 2019. And I found this quote on the internet, which I thought summed up the hobby really well. Stamp collecting is so much more than a hobby. It's a lifestyle, a community, and it is a lifestyle for me now. You know, as it was mentioned at the beginning, I'm writing about it, and I'm studying philately in my free time, and the community that I'm part of online is brilliant. I've made some fantastic connections, And thanks to social media right now, philately is enjoying a boom amongst younger people. So thanks to Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, you know, there's a lot of people out there who are sharing stamps and talking about them. So just to give you a few examples, on the bottom left there, we have a guy called the Punk Philatelist, and he has a blog about stamps, and he believes that stamps are a vibrant expression of pop culture. And in the middle there, we have a chap called Graham Beck. He has his own YouTube channel called Exploring Stamps, really informative. They're just very short, I wouldn't call them movies, but, you know, clips of him talking about particular stamps or whatever for, you know, 15, 20 minutes. So he's exploring the world one stamp at a time. And on the right there, we have Philately, my friend John Simper. He's very active on social media, and he offers a monthly subscription on a website called Patreon. So you can subscribe to this website, and depending how much you want to spend, you know, a couple of pounds or £6 a month, he will then post packs of stamps and first day covers off to you. So yes, for me, it's a way of escaping and unplugging from the real world. And I also love to research and learn, you know, the topics of astronomy and philately. And I also love to promote both subjects. And that's what I'm doing here this evening. So just to give you a brief introduction to philately, and just to draw your attention to these fantastic stamps that were issued in June this year, I think, celebrating our sun. The issue is called Sun Science, and they were issued in America. And you can see there's 10 images there that celebrate the science behind NASA's ongoing exploration of our nearest star. And the images display common events on the sun, such as solar flares, sunspots, and coronal loops. So if you just Google these, you know, you can order a pack and have them sent over from the US. So what is philately? Well, the word philately is the English transliteration of the French philately. I won't put my French accent on. And it's taken from the Greek root word phil or phile, meaning an attraction or affinity to something, and atelier, meaning exempt from duties and taxes. And the two words then form philately. And it's the study of postage stamps and postal history, and also refers to the collection, appreciation, and research activities on stamps and other philatelic products. For example, Cinderella stamps, poster stamps. We've got mail that's been on aeroplanes, mail that's been on boats, sea mail, and space mail, which has its own branch of philately called astrophilately. So I just wanted to give you an example here of a really interesting and quite fun Cinderella stamp celebrating space. So Cinderella stamps are virtually anything resembling a postage stamp, but not issued for postal purposes by a government postal administration. So for example, if you've ever had a Christmas card through your letterbox from the Scout Post, then you'll often see that, you know, there might be a stamp on that envelope, and that's an example of a Cinderella stamp. And this example here is the Solar System Rocket Service stamps. They were issued by the Broadway Approvals, who were based in Denmark Hill, London, and they advertised in boys' comics from 1955 till the 70s. And you may notice, if your screen's big enough, that the perforations aren't perforations at all, but they are just tiny dots printed on printed with ink, but they look like proper stamps. And on the bottom right there, hopefully you can see that those stamps, they don't deliver to Venus. There's no Pluto. There's no service there for some reason. Maybe it's just too far away. And philately involves more than just stamp collecting or the study of postage. It's possible to be a philatelist without owning stamps. For instance, the stamps being studied may be very rare or reside only in museums. So for example, I'm sure some of you may recognize this stamp. It's a very famous stamp. It's the 1 cent magenta. There's only one left of its kind, and it last sold at auction this year in June for $8.3 million, and that was bought by Stanley Gibbons. So I just wanted to draw your attention to this. So when I found out that the 1 cent magenta was being auctioned off this year, I contacted Sotheby's in New York for a catalogue, because I thought it was just a really interesting piece of philatelic information and history to have in my collection. And I was flicking through and I came across this page and I was like, oh, I can see a comet marking there on that page. So it's very common for owners of the 1 cent magenta to mark the back of the stamps, you know, which kind of made it theirs, if you like. So you can see on the image there on the top right, you can just see the initials SW and the outline of a stiletto shoe. So that was the last guy that owned the stamp was Stuart Weitzman. He was a very famous shoe designer. So yeah, these images here on the bigger picture, they were actually taken of the back of the stamp using an infrared filter on a camera, and it's brought up all these markings on the back of the stamp. So the guy who marked the back of the stamp with this comet marking, he was Frederick T. Small. He was an Australian stamp collector. He was an engineer, a tennis official, and an executive of the Celanese Corporation, which I think was a chemical company. And he bought the stamp in 1940. And for whatever reason, I'm still trying to find this out, he decided to mark the back of the stamp with a comet. And I have tried to research into this guy, thinking, oh, maybe he was an astronomer, but I can't see any connection with astronomy whatsoever. So yeah, I'm really intrigued to know why he decided to choose, you know, this unusual marking. And if anyone knows, please let me know. Okay, so reasons for collecting, just to give you a quick slide on why people collect stamps. So, you know, a lot of people have their own reasons for collecting. Most people start off collecting and sorting out stamps by country or theme. You can buy packs of stamps online to get you started. And I think people soon realize it's a hobby that can really get can get out of control very, very quickly, and it can seem very overwhelming. But once you realize your main interests, you can focus on that. So some people like to collect purely for the postage stamp gum. So the gum can affect the value of the stamp, but it's also of an interest to collectors because sometimes stamps may be printed, or the illustration on the stamp may be printed on the gum side by mistake. So these are really sought after by collectors with an interest in uncommon varieties. Perforations, as you know, they're a way of separating the stamps, and for the stamp collector, perforations matter, not only as a way to distinguish different stamps, but also as a part of the condition of the stamps. And in rare circumstances, a stamp may have different perforations on opposite sides. And of course, rarity as well. So the bottom left there, we have the inverted Jenny, which is a very famous stamp. It's a 24-cent United States postage stamp, which was first issued in 1918. And as you can see, the image of the aeroplane is upside down. And it's probably the most famous error in American philately. Only one pane of 100 of the invert stamps was ever found, making this error one of the most prized in all philately. And I just want to draw your attention here to an example of an astronomy error on a stamp. So you can see there in the middle, we have a stamp issued in Czechoslovakia in 1967. And I've zoomed in and blown up just a tiny little corner of the image there on the bottom left-hand side. And you can see, hopefully, that the engraver of the stamp has actually mixed up 2 letters of the alphabet so that the constellations Lepus and Lupus are transposed. And also people will collect purely for the theme, which is me, for example. I am a thematic collector because I love to collect stamps with an astronomy theme. But it's not just about the stamp. So you may remember when I explained what philately is, I mentioned other philatelic material. So it's not just the stamp that's of interest to collectors. Philatelists also like to collect first day covers, which is a postage stamp on a postal card or stamped envelope, which is franked on the first day the stamp is authorized for use. And the stamps are affixed to specially designed envelopes, often with the design of the theme that is being celebrated. So here we have a lovely example from Canada, which was issued in 2018 and celebrating the 150th anniversary of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. And you can see there the stamps, the Milky Way on the left, and a photograph of the Northern Lights featured on the stamp there on the right-hand side. And a lovely issue from the UK was produced in 2002 by a company called Benham. So the stamps were issued in 2002 to celebrate the subject of astronomy. And you can see they're affixed there to this really beautiful and colourful first cover with an image of the solar system there. And with the growing celebration of space and astronomy through philately, some covers made it beyond our atmosphere into space aboard shuttles or Apollo missions. And the Apollo 15 postal cover incident, for example, is notorious. Unknown to NASA, the crew of Apollo 15, who were Al Worden, David R. Scott, and James B. Irwin, they agreed to carry 400 unauthorized postmark covers aboard the spacecraft and subsequently onto the surface of the moon. And upon the astronauts' return, the covers were postmarked again aboard the recovery ship, the Okinawa, and Hermann Seeger, the German stamp dealer involved in the plan, sold some of the covers for prices in the thousands. And when the news of the flown covers reached NASA, the astronauts were reprimanded and forbidden to fly in space ever again. So if you guys see this on eBay or at your local auction house or a charity shop for a couple of quid, I recommend you buy it because, you know, they do go for thousands of pounds. And just a quickie on presentation packs. So these typically contain a full set of new stamp issues. So you saw previously these stamps, the issue that was produced in 2002, celebrating astronomy. And presentation packs comprise a folded card containing detailed notes about the stamps, and often a card with clear strips for holding the stamps in place. And again, these are all then held within a clear sleeve. So this example here is fantastic. So you can learn all about the Herschel's telescope and the Hubble telescope, and the cardboard inlay actually folds out. So you have a star map there, and you can learn all about the stars. So I just think this is a really great example of learning from stamps without actually opening a book or even looking on the internet. It's all there within this tiny cardboard presentation pack. So the hand stamps are cancellations of their own alone are of interest to some collectors, and for astronomy philatelists there are some wonderful hand stamps available. And these are just simply ink stamps used to cancel the stamp, so they can't be reused, and they come in a variety of shapes and sizes, pictures and ink colour. And imaginative hand stamps are eye-catching, and they form an important part of the cover. And the stamps on the covers can be cancelled with the usual first day of issue date stamp at a post office, but often people will send the covers away to a special hand stamp centre to have the stamps cancelled with a special pictorial design, which adds to the theme of the cover. And they're often stamped with a picture and the location of something or someone relevant to the stamps. Sometimes there are up to 40 pictorial cancels available just for one set of issue of stamps. And if postmarks are your thing, you are known as a markophilist, and the subject of collecting postmarks is known as markophily. So here we have a great example on the top right there, a pictorial hand stamp that was produced for the Space Science issue in 2012. And the bottom right then we have a postmark that was produced for the 50th anniversary of Man on the Moon. And I really like the image on the bottom right because, as you can see, they've substituted the number 0 for an astronaut's footprint. But not all postmarks are produced to correspond with the first day issue of a stamp. So for example, in the middle there, we have a brilliant cancellation commemorating Comet Bennett in 1970, and its perihelion on the 20th of March 1970. And on the left, in November 2018, a postmark was produced to celebrate InSight, the robotic lander landing on Mars. So I think this is just a really good example, especially the example on the left-hand side, where the stamp and the postmark have nothing to do with each other. So a good example of one that has just been recently issued in the UK is the Emma Raducanu, I think that's how you pronounce his surname, postmark. So they've produced this postmark, but no stamps associated with it. So the guy who sent me this postmark on the left-hand side, or the envelope, he purely just affixed any old stamp to the envelope and sent it off to a post office, or took it to a post office just to get that postmark. And can you sign my cover, please? It's something that I say a lot. Autographs from eminent scientists and astronomers form a really special part of my collection. I have autographs ranging from Dr. Alan Chapman, Ian Ridpath, who is the chairman of the Astrospace Stamp Society. Here he is on the left. I'm sure some of you have met him. He's a very keen astrophilatelist like myself. I have signatures from Jamal Khalili and David Attenborough. And yeah, just some recent ones here. In the top middle, I sent the cover off to Pete Lawrence and Chris Lintott at the Sky at Night. And the bottom one there, I contacted Jocelyn Bell Burnell. She gave me her address. I posted the first day cover off to her, and she very kindly signed it and returned it to me. And on the bottom right, this cover shows an envelope celebrating John Glenn, the first American in space. And I'm not sure if this is an authentic handwritten signature. It could be an auto pen. And an auto pen is a device used for the automatic signing of a signature or autograph, and they're often used when celebrities or famous people get hundreds of letters each day. So for example, when the Apollo program, really took off and it became very popular, the astronauts were receiving fan mail, hundreds and thousands of pieces of fan mail every day wanting their signatures, and obviously they couldn't keep up and sign all of these things. So the majority of covers or photographs may be produced, or the signatures on them, will have been produced by an auto pen. And there's a really interesting website out there, if you guys do have anything signed by astronauts, called Astronaut Auto Pen Guide. It's a fantastic resource to check if any covers you have signed by astronauts are genuine or not. But to be honest, I have looked on there and I'm still none the wiser, because you have to have an eagle eye and you know, attention to detail. So yeah, maybe one day I'll get someone to verify them all. So all of this is great, but what can these 4 pieces of philatelic information teach us about astronomy? So I mentioned, you know, the stamps, the postmark, I've talked about the signatures, and also we've got the cachet, which is the illustration on the left-hand side of the envelope. And all of this information on a first day cover unravels a factual account about what an astronomical event, such as the centenary of general relativity. So here we have the first day cover. We have the stamps, we've got the postmark there. You can see 2 signatures on the cover and the cachet on the bottom left. So each stamp on the cover showcases work of Einstein and Hawking. We've got Albert Einstein, Stephen Hawking, gravitational waves, Hawking radiation, 2 black holes colliding, and a black hole. And hopefully you can see that on your screens. We have 2 silver postmarks, which were used to cancel the stamps on the 1st of July 2016, the date the stamps were issued. And the cachet tells us what the stamps are celebrating, and it also tells us they were launched at Starmus 2016, which is an international festival focused on celebrating astronomy. And the 2 signatures there, we have one autograph from Kip Thorne, Professor Kip Thorne, and Professor Bernard Schutz. And I met Kip Thorne back in 2019 at a lecture at Cardiff University, and he had just opened a new physics laboratory at the university, and he was delivering a talk. And Professor Bernard Schutz was also in attendance, and I had just recently interviewed him for the Royal Astronomical Society magazine, following his recent Eddington Medal Award for his work in gravitational waves. And Kip Thorne was actually Bernard's PhD supervisor at Caltech University, and they've remained great friends ever since. And obviously I knew I was going to this event and these guys were going to be there, so I chose the first day cover. And obviously this was very relevant. Packed it in my bag, took it along with me, and they both signed it, which was great. So I think this is a fantastic example of what philately can teach someone about astronomy. So for example, if I passed this cover to someone who knew little about general relativity and cosmology, they could take this away and do hours of research looking at the details on the stamps. You know, who are these people? What's a gravitational wave? Who are the people that signed the cover? What's general relativity? There's so much going on there, and on just this one piece of small paper, if you like. So you could be sent off down a rabbit hole for hours. And I just wanted to focus on these stamps because I think they're absolutely fantastic. So the images are printed on iridescent foil, which really makes them unique and eye-catching. And I had great fun researching these because my knowledge of cosmology isn't great. So it was really fun to just kind of delve deep to find out what the words and diagrams meant. So on the top there, left there, you can see we have Albert Einstein and his famous Einstein's theory of special relativity equation that expresses the fact that mass and energy are the same physical entity and can be changed into each other. And someone pointed out the other day it shouldn't be a capital M. In fact, I think it should be a small m. Then we have Stephen Hawking and the Birkenstein-Hawking equation on the stamp. And on the right there, we have the famous trousers diagram, which represents 2 black holes colliding. And on the bottom left, we have a diagram of Hawking radiation. And this diagram was actually based on a blackboard sketch sent to the stamp illustrators from Cambridge University, where Stephen Hawking worked. Then bottom middle, we have a black hole. And then on the right, we have gravitational waves. So hopefully you're all wondering what the first astronomy stamp was. Well, the first astronomy themed stamp dates to 1887, when Brazil issued a perforated stamp. It's buff and blue in colour. It depicts Crux Australis, the Southern Cross, an asterism of the constellation Crux, which is seen in the Southern Hemisphere. And here is the stamp. So the asterism is astronomically accurate on the stamp, with Acrux and Gacrux pointing the way to the south celestial pole, and it's illustrated as if the observer were looking up to the sky from Earth. And stars are a symbolic part of the Brazilian flag. They represent the constellations in the Southern Hemisphere and show how they were seen from Rio de Janeiro during the early hours of the morning on November 15th, 1889, the day the country shifted from an empire to a republic. So as you can see, the Southern Cross constellation is a really important part of their history and culture, so it's understandable that it would feature heavily on stamps. And as you will see over the next few slides, the Southern Cross was a favourite to print on Brazilian stamps for almost 10 years, with the colour and size of the stamp evolving over that time. So the second astronomy stamp was also issued in Brazil 3 years later in 1890. They issued a further series of perforated postage stamps featuring the Southern Cross, this time in a variety of colours and values, which you can see there top right. And the asterism featured for a second time in 1890, but this time on perforated newspaper stamps. So that's the image on the bottom left. And newspaper stamps are stamps that were used to pay for the cost of mailing newspapers or periodicals. And for this design, the asterism was illustrated shining above the Sugarloaf Mountain, Brazil's world famous landmark. So I think you can see my cursor, I hope. Oh, no, maybe it's gone to sleep. But you can just see the asterism there at the top of the stamp in the circle between the wording, and then bottom right, you might just be able to make up a tiny image of the Sugarloaf Mountain under the letter A. And these stamps were used again in 1898 when Brazil reissued the stamps as newspaper surcharge stamps. And these were overprinted with the year and stamp value. And the term surcharge in philately describes any type of overprint that alters the price of a stamp. So surcharges raise or lower the face value of existing stamps when prices have changed too quickly to produce an appropriate new issue, or simply to use up the surplus stock. So you can see the black ink stamped on top of those stamps which have raised the price. And the star appears. So Venus, the morning star, appeared on a set of stamps issued in Brazil in 1894, and it's the first stamp illustrating or featuring a planet. And these stamps are known as Madrugada Republicana, the Republican Dawn, and they commemorate the beginning of the Republican period. As I mentioned previously, on the 15th of November 1889, a group of military officers known as Republican Dawn overthrew Emperor Dom Pedro II, with the fall of the monarchy taking place around 8 AM that day. And research of astronomical charts has shown that Venus was visible in the morning sky at the time of the fall of the monarchy, which just affirms then that the bright star on the stamp is undoubtedly Venus. So the Southern Cross in reverse. So jumping ahead now to the 20th of June 1930, the 4th Pan American Congress of Architects was held in Rio de Janeiro, and to commemorate this event, 3 stamps were issued, including this 300 wreath stamp illustrating the Southern Cross above the Sugarloaf, with the addition of 2 columns or an architrave in the foreground. And if you compare this image to the previous stamps that have been issued, you may notice that the asterism is in fact a mirror image of its true self. Why is this? Well, the mirror image of the asterism on the 1930 stamp was perhaps illustrated as if the observer were looking down on the celestial sphere, as sailors and astronomers would have done when using an armillary sphere or astrolabe for navigation. And if you are unfamiliar with an armillary sphere, then you can see one here that's featured on a stamp issued in Nicaragua in 1985, which celebrates the return of Halleys Comet. And after all, the Southern Cross is depicted in reverse on the flag, and an astrolabe features on the Empire of the Brazil flag, again tying in with Brazil's nautical history. And I'm not entirely sure why the illustration of the Southern Cross was changed at this particular time on the stamp. Again, something I'm looking into, and if any of you guys know, please let me know. So the global spread of astronomy on stamps. So slowly other countries issued stamps with an astronomy theme. In 1930, Italy issued a stamp illustrating flying boats and the Southern Cross, and this celebrates the transatlantic seaplane squadron flight from Rome to Rio de Janeiro. In 1941, Norway produced a stamp which depicts fishing boats and the aurora. And the 50th anniversary of the Mizusawa Latitude Observatory was celebrated on a stamp in Japan in 1949. And in the same year, the Equatorial Line Monument marking the position of the equator featured on a stamp issued in Ecuador. In 2009, San Marino celebrated the International Year of Astronomy. In 1970, Poland celebrated space exploration, and the Hubble Space Telescope featured on a stamp issued in 1981 in America on the stamp issue called Comprehending the Universe. So while countries all over the world, from Colombia to Nigeria to Japan to Russia, celebrated astronomy and humankind's achievement in space, the UK did not start commemorating astronomy in space until much later. And in 1966, the Royal Mail issued a stamp depicting a radio telescope at Jodrell Bank. It's bright yellow in colour, it cost 4 pennies, and the stamp was issued within a set of 4, with each image celebrating a different aspect of British technology. And then in 1970, the Royal Mail issued a stamp commemorating the 150th anniversary of the Royal Astronomical Society. And it was issued within a set of 5 stamps celebrating anniversaries in the UK. You can see it's bright pink in colour, and the stamp depicts William Herschel holding a sketch of Uranus, which he discovered in 1781. And in the middle there we have Francis Bailey, and Bailey's beads are named after him, and these are an arc of bright spots seen during a total or annular eclipse. And on the right there we have John Herschel, William Herschel's son, and he's well known for discovering 7 moons of Saturn. And on the right then we have Herschel's 40-foot telescope, which was constructed in Slough between 1785 and 1789. So yeah, it's a small stamp, but you can glean a lot of information from it. Who are these people? What's Herschel holding? What's the Royal Astronomical Society? How on earth do you build a 40-foot telescope? So yeah, tiny piece of paper, lots of information there. And again, you know, you can learn a lot from a stamp. So I've just chosen 5 examples of astronomy stamps issued in the UK over recent years. You saw this previously. In 2002, the Royal Mail issued a miniature sheet of stamps celebrating British astronomy. And whilst the pictures are very attractive, unfortunately, there seems to be a lack of connection to British astronomy and astronomers because all the images were actually taken using the Hubble Space Telescope. And in 1768, James Cook boarded the ship Endeavour in Plymouth and sailed to Tahiti. The trip took around 8 months, and the purpose of the trip was to view the transit of Venus with the aim to gather astronomical information to measure the solar system. And the Royal Mail issued a set of 6 stamps in August 2018 to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the voyage of James Cook and his companions Joseph Banks, Charles Green, and Daniel Solander. So James Cook and Charles Green made drawings during their observations of the transit, and these have been used here on the first class stamp called the Endeavour Voyage and superimposed onto an image of the sun. And one of the most interesting details of the drawings is the black drop effect that they observed during the transit, which you can clearly see there on the stamp. And the stamp is also illustrated with a sextant, which was used for navigation purposes during the voyage. Excuse me, I'll just have a drink. And one of the Millennium Projects commemorated on stamps was the National Space Centre at Leicester. Well, you may be wondering, where on earth is a space centre on the stamp? Well, unfortunately, it wasn't actually finished at the time the stamp was released in 2000, and so could not be illustrated. So instead, the Royal Mail just had to represent this Millennium Project with a generic picture of the night sky. And in 1987, the Royal Mail issued 4 stamps marking the 300th anniversary of Isaac Newton's Principia. And despite their small size, the stamps are bursting with information about Newton's accomplishment. So the 34-pence stamp there on the bottom right portrays the satellite along with Newton's insights on projectile motion and orbits. And the 22-pence stamp just above it honours his study of planetary motion through the depiction of 6 planets orbiting the sun, on top of which you can see is an impressive coronal loop. And the 50th anniversary of Patrick Moore's BBC TV programme, The Sky at Night, was commemorated by a set of 6 colourful and attractive stamps released in 2007. The designs show, for example, the Cat's Eye Nebula, the Saturn Nebula, and the Helix Nebula, and superimposed on each image is an outline of the home constellation with the location of the object marked. And all objects are identified with a number beginning with the letter C, which is their reference in Patrick's own brand Caldwell catalogue, his full surname being Caldwell Moore. And I found this really interesting the other day. I was doing a bit of research on, astronomy and stamps, and I came across this paper called Adjusting Object Glasses of Refracting Telescopes. And in this paper, it actually mentions that German telescope makers have used postage stamps to separate the objective lenses in apochromatic telescopes. and using stamps sometimes replace the need to use mucilage on paper or glue or gum or tinfoil, presumably because obviously the stamp is very thin and it already comes with glue on it. And yeah, I just thought this was a really unusual example of philately and astronomy coming together. So I'm excited to read more about this subject too. Okay, so I'm about halfway through. I hope you're all still with me. So you probably already noticed that everything from astronomers to telescopes to constellations appear on stamps, and I've given you a real mishmash of examples. And there isn't much point in collecting stamps if you aren't going to learn something from it. And this is why I love collecting stamps with an astronomy theme so much. And Margaret Morris, she's an amazing lady. She turned 90 this year. She's won a lot of awards for her philatelic exhibiting. She's a huge collector of astronomy themed stamps as well. And she published a paper in 2013 called Astronomy and Philately, where she discussed the two subjects. And she's grouped her collection into 3 main groups, and I think this is a really useful way of organising a philately collection within the subjects of astronomy. And I'm just going to give you a few of my own examples under each section, just to illustrate what subjects we can learn in astronomy from philately in an organised and logical way. I added my own 4th heading because the topic doesn't quite fit into any of the 3 that she has mentioned. And of course, this might be because it's classed under its own branch of astrophilately, which I mentioned earlier. But it's a topic that we all know and love, and I didn't want to exclude it. So I'm going to be looking at the observers. So I'll give you a few examples of stamps with astronomers on them and astronomical anniversaries. So for example, the Royal Astronomical Society. Then I'll be looking at the observables, and again looking at some examples with our solar system and everyone's favourites, discoveries, comets. And the observations, how were these observers making these observations? So there's a couple of slides on astronomical instruments on stamps. And then the 4th group, which I've added, the explorers. So I'll be looking at human exploration and achievements, such as a space race and moon landing on stamps. Okay, so the observers. We all know that astronomy is one of the oldest natural sciences, and this subject has been celebrated on stamps all over the world. And astronomy dates back to the 4th millennium BC. Babylonian astronomers were skilled observers and mathematicians, and they studied the sky and devoted their time to studying the planetary movements and adopted the use of the zodiacal belt. And they also recorded observations of comets and eclipses, and these studies were recorded on cuneiform clay tablets. And this stamp here was issued in Austria in 1965, and it depicts a cuneiform clay tablet. And these tablets show a really good understanding of arithmetic, algebra, and geometry. And the Egyptians, by the 3rd millennium BC, Egyptians had already adopted a 365-day year, and annual flooding of the Nile was determined observing the stars. The stamp here depicts Hathor and was issued in the Central African Republic in 1964. And according to ancient myths, Hathor was a sky goddess known as Lady of Stars and Sovereign of Stars, and she was linked to Sirius. She was originally a personification of the Milky Way, which was considered to be the milk that flowed from the udders of a heavenly cow. And China, the Chinese have had a very long history of astronomy dating back to the 2nd millennium BC. And in a 2nd century tomb, a silk roll was found which depicts comets and is considered the first atlas of comets. And on the bottom left there, we have a stamp that was issued in China in 1986, which commemorates the return of Halleys Comet. And the image on the stamp echoes images that feature on the scroll. So observations of celestial bodies and scientific discoveries have shaped our way of thinking about our place in the universe. So just jumping ahead now from the ancient observers to the scientists and astronomers who changed our view of our place in the universe over the last few centuries. We have Copernicus. He's a very popular astronomer to feature on stamps. He was a Polish astronomer who proposed that the planets have the sun as a fixed point to which their motions are to be referred. And he's featured here on a stamp issued in Poland in 1942. And here he is again, issued or featuring on a stamp which was issued in Hungary in 1973 to commemorate 500 years since his birth. And you may notice on the left-hand side there that it's a great example again of a Cinderella stamp. There's no value to the stamp, so if you were to rip that off and use it on an envelope, obviously it wouldn't get very far. And then we have Tycho Brahe. He was a Danish nobleman, astronomer, and writer known for his accurate and comprehensive astronomical observations. And here he is on a stamp issued in Denmark. And he was quite a character. In fact, he had a false nose made of brass, which was being cut off during a sword fight. And he formed his own system, the Tychonic system. And his system correctly saw the moon as orbiting the Earth and the planets as orbiting the sun. But he erroneously considered the sun to be orbiting the Earth. And Johannes Kepler was Tycho's assistant. Kepler was a convinced Copernican and considered Tycho's model to be mistaken. And he is also, of course, famous for his laws of planetary motion. And here he is here on a stamp commemorated in the Czech Republic in 2009. And the father of astronomy, Galileo, he was an engineer and a physicist, and he is famous for his use of the telescope and making celestial observations. And he observed the phases of Venus and the 4 largest satellites of Jupiter. And whilst he wasn't the first person to observe the moon, he made topographical charts estimating the heights of the mountains on the moon. And here he is here, featuring on a stamp issued in Ascension in 1971. And Sir Isaac Newton, recognised as one of the greatest mathematicians and scientists of all time, Born in England, he formulated the laws of motion and made seminal contributions to optics, and he was celebrated on a postage stamp in 1987 in Grenada, and he's illustrated holding the apple that was said to give him his inspiration to formulate the theory of gravity. Just to continue with the observers, you saw the stamp previously. So this is the commemorative stamp issued in 1970, celebrating the 150th anniversary of the Royal Astronomical Society. And the society was formed on January the 12th in 1820 at a tavern in London. And the society has now grown to 4,000 members and is one of the most eminent societies in the world promoting astronomy and geophysics. And last February in 2020, the Royal Mail issued a set of stamps to commemorate the bicentenary of the RAS. And this issue, called Visions of the Universe, has 8 stamps in total, and they illustrate astronomical phenomena such as Comet 67P, the Cat's Eye Nebula, pulsars, Jupiter's auroras, the galaxy Cygnus. We've got gravitational lensing and black holes, and each stamp includes one simple line of text that describes phenomena which has been discovered or investigated by British astronomers and astrophysicists. So, for example, on the left-hand side there in the middle, the first-class black hole stamp displays the text, "Black holes are superdense regions of space," and is a nod to the English natural philosopher John Michell, who first suggested their existence in 1783, and the late famous British professor and theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking, who made predictions about their behaviour. And these stamps were illustrated by a London-based artist called Robert Ball. I'm sure you'll agree, the stamps are really colourful in blues and reds, and they bring to life these amazing phenomena in a way that photographs certainly could not. And in particular, just to go back to the black hole stamp on the left, this is actually based on the work of Dr. Ziri Younsi of University College London, and he was part of the Event Horizon Telescope team that captured the groundbreaking first image of a black hole in 2019. And he shared computer models of his work on black holes with Robert Ball, the illustrator, to inform the design. And I think these stamps are a really fitting celebration for the bicentenary of such a prestigious society and the contributions of British scientists to research in this field. I just wanted to show you a quick example of the Visions of the Universe stamps on a special first day cover. You can see there we've got Stephen Hawking and a special commemorative 50p coin, which was minted in 2019 as part of the Royal Mint's Innovators in Science series and celebrates Hawking's life. And the bottom left there, a few special hand stamps were issued for this issue, including the original logo of the Royal Astronomical Society with Herschel's 40-foot telescope. And I'm sure many of you know now that the RAS has actually modernized the logo now and it doesn't feature that anymore. And then the top left, we have an image of a black hole. So the observables, what have observers been looking at? So our solar system is home to the sun, 8 planets and fascinating astronomical objects, including comets, asteroids and dwarf planets. And on the 16th of October 2012, the Royal Mail celebrated the 50th anniversary of the first British satellite Ariel 1, and images of our incredible solar system featured on 6 detailed stamps. Using imagery taken from various probes, colour and imagination were brought to life, giving us armchair astronomers a close-up view of these mysterious worlds. And featuring on a first-class stamp, this fiery orange image of the sun was photographed by the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, which was a joint project between ESA and NASA, and the spacecraft continues to make observations of the sun's chromosphere, atmosphere and corona, despite it initially only being a 2-year mission. And planets featuring on the stamp set include Venus and Mars. Venus and Mars are Earth's nearest neighbours and the planetary neighbours, and the images chosen on the first class and 77p stamps are examples of just how beautiful these planets are. The exploration of Venus and Mars have strong UK connections. The Venus Express mission was proposed by scientists at Oxford University, and the image taken by ESA's Mars Express probe was the first European mission to Mars, with the UK having involvement in 3 of the 6 onboard instruments. And Earth featured on its own stamp in 1984 when the Royal Mail commemorated the 100-year anniversary of the adoption of the Greenwich Meridian, the world's prime meridian, and the image chosen on the 16-pence stamp is that of Earth as seen from Apollo 11, with a curved red line of 0 longitude superimposed on top. And I'm sure many of us will remember the total solar eclipse in 1999, probably because it was cloudy. 7 stamps were issued by the Guernsey Post Office to commemorate the eclipse, And these are a fantastic set, taking the collector through 5 stages of the eclipse, including the first and second contact. We've got totality, we've got Bailey's beads and the diamond ring effect. And as you can probably see, again, 6 stamps are holding a value and can be used for postage, but the stamp on the right hand side there, another great example of a Cinderella stamp because it has no value. And comets. So comets have been the cause of fascination and fear for centuries. Originating from the cold, dark outer reaches of the solar system, comets are composed of ice and rock. And you can see here on the right hand side this beautiful mini sheet or a miniature sheet, or maybe even a souvenir sheet. They go by a few names. That was issued in India in 2018. You can see there's some comets there. Well, comets originate from 2 locations, the Kuiper belt and the Oort cloud. Comets originating from the Kuiper belt are short period comets and can orbit the sun in less than 200 years, whereas comets originating from the Oort cloud take much longer to orbit the sun, often thousands of years, and are known as long period comets. And there's some really fantastic comet stamps out there. For example, here on the bottom right, we have a lovely comet shaped stamp that was issued in Finland in 2014 as part of the Signs in the Sky issue. And 2 stamps here, which were issued in Congo in 1986. And on the left, I hope I say this correctly, we have Comet Ikea-Seki, which was seen in 1965. And we have Comet West, which was visible in 1976. Halley's Comet, everyone's favourite comet, I think. It was named after the famous astronomer Edmund Halley, or Halley. Halley's Comet is perhaps the most famous short period comet in our history due to its return period of 76 years. And some of us may even see it twice in our lifetime. Unfortunately, I was 5 back in 1986, so I never got to see it, but maybe I'll still be alive when it comes back. And the comet has been recorded as far back as 240 BC in China, and was embroidered onto the world famous Bayeux tapestry. And this souvenir stamp sheet that you can see here was issued in Bolivia in 1986, features scene 32 from the Bayeux tapestry, and the comet can clearly be seen there on the upper border. And the appearance of Halley's Comet was celebrated globally on stamps, and here in the UK, the Royal Mail issued a fantastic set of 4 stamps which were illustrated by the famous cartoonist Ralph Steadman. The stamps are colourful and imaginative. Just going round there from the bottom right, we've got a rather disgruntled but comical looking Halley. Then on the left we have an image of 2 comets which represent seeing it twice in a lifetime. Top right there we have Giotto, the spacecraft, and on the left then the comet orbiting the sun. And the set of first aid covers that I really enjoy collecting are those that were issued by the Presentation Philatelic Services in London between 1984 and 1995, and within each cover there is a card inlay. And each card then explains what, that each issue or each cover is depicting a fine art painting or other collectible auction by Sotheby's of London. So for example, here on the left hand side, you can see this image or photograph of a telescope. And this is actually made of silk. So it's a silk cachet. And this is a portable refracting telescope, which was manufactured by Peter Dolland, a well-known maker of optical instruments. And the card inlay inside tells you all about it, and it also tells you that it was sold by Sotheby's at auction in 1985 for £22,000. And Hailbot and Neowise. It's 26 years this year that Hailbot was discovered. It moved across our skies for approximately 18 months, and Hailbot was one of the most observed comets of the 20th century. Discovered independently by Alan Hale and Thomas Bopp in the United States on the 23rd of July 1995, the comet passed perihelion on the 1st of April 1997. And as far as I'm aware, very few stamps were issued to celebrate this exciting event. On the 1st of April, though, in 1997, the Dominican Republic issued a set of stamps depicting the comet positioned against a tropical pink and yellow sky, which you can see there, with its 2 tails of gas and dust clearly illustrated. And in my collection, I have this really nice custom cover commemorating the comet, and it was sent to me by a former NASA employee who specializes in making his own covers. And you guys could make your own covers too. You can get some blank envelopes and put any design on it that you want, and put a stamp on it and have it sent off if there's a special postmark out there that you want on the cover. So the cover is postmarked at Cloudcroft, New Mexico on the 24th of March 1997, which is 2 days after the comet made its closest approach to Earth. And Cloudcroft is actually the location where Alan Hale first made the discovery, and the image on the cover illustrates the position of the comet in the night sky from the date of its discovery to the date it was last observed in the southern hemisphere. So a great example here again, where the postmark and the stamp have nothing to do with each other. The guy who sent me this, obviously when he made this cover, he was just interested in the postmark there because of the place and the date. And for those keen astronomers amongst us, Comet Neowise would have not passed you by this year. It was first discovered in March 2020 by the Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer, and the comet's closest approach to Earth was on the 23rd of July last year. And the comet could easily be seen with the naked eye, even in urban areas, and it is now known as one of the brightest comets since the appearance of Hailbot in 1997. And Sark in Guernsey was designated a dark sky island in 2011, and the 10-year anniversary was celebrated this year, and a set of 6 stamps were issued in June commemorating the anniversary and included this lovely stamp featuring Neowise. And I was really excited when this stamp came out because I thought, gosh, will we ever see Neowise on a stamp? So yeah, I didn't have to wait too long, you know, just about 11 months, but I think they've done a fantastic job with that stamp there. And the observations, so the tools of the observers, how were people observing? So for thousands of years, our ancestors looked to the sky, they observed and named the stars and constellations after animals, objects and mythological characters, and they would worship the solstices and watch the planets traversing across the sky. And all of these early attempts at recording and understanding the sky have been found on the designs of stamps. So the prehistoric monument of Stonehenge in Wiltshire has long been studied for its possible connection with ancient astronomy. The site is aligned in the direction of the sunrise of the summer solstice and the sunset of the winter solstice. And archaeoastronomers have made a range of further claims about the site's connection to astronomy, its meaning and its use. It has appeared twice on stamps issued in the UK, once in 1990, celebrating the subject of astronomy. You can see there on the left-hand side with a gyroscope on the bottom left of the stamp, and a ship navigating by the stars. And I love the phases of the moon there arcing above Stonehenge. I think that's lovely. And then again, Stonehenge featured in 2005, which celebrated, or the stamp issues celebrated World Heritage Sites. And the Nebra Sky Disk. This is a bronze disc, it's blue and gold in colour, and it was found in Germany in 1999 by metal detectorists. And these symbols on the disc are often interpreted generally as the sun or full moon. We have a lunar crescent and stars, which include a cluster of 7 stars interpreted as the Pleiades. There's 2 golden arcs along the sides, which are interpreted to mark the angle between the solstices, and these may have been added later. And a final addition was another arc at the bottom, surrounded with multiple strokes of uncertain meaning, variously interpreted as a solar barge with numerous oars, the Milky Way, or maybe even a rainbow. An archaeologist placed the disc within the first millennium BCE, and the disc may be an astronomical instrument, and it featured on a postage stamp here in Germany in 2008, celebrating German archaeology. And other astronomical instruments that have been attributed to watching and recording our skies include the astrolabe, the armillary sphere, but perhaps the most important of all is the telescope. And we have an example here, which featured on a stamp issued in Sierra Leone, commemorating the 450th anniversary of Copernicus's death. So observatories, telescopes are often housed in observatories, and in 1921, the first stamp depicting an observatory was issued in central Lithuania. It was produced in 2 forms. As you can see, we've got a perforate stamp on the left and an imperforate stamp on the right. And the image on the stamps displays the Poxabut Observatory, named after the astronomer Marcin Poxabut, who was famous for his observational work and for computing the orbit of Mercury. And the observatory theme continued. In 1948, the United States printed their first astronomy-themed 3-cent stamp with an image of the Paloma Mountain Observatory, and the stamp was issued to commemorate the observatory's opening. And the observatory houses the Hale telescope, which is a 200-inch telescope named after George Hale, and he was a famous American solar astronomer, well known for his work on the discovery of magnetic fields in sunspots. And the reflecting telescope was the largest at the time and launched new developments in telescope design, including its mount and mirror. And the last section now, the explorers. So from July 1957 to December 1958, scientists from 67 countries participated in various Earth science projects as part of the International Geophysical Year. And to mark the occasion, the US Post Office issued a stamp featuring a striking illustration of the sun, which was in the most active phase of its 11-year cycle, the solar cycle 19, which is the 19th solar cycle since 1755. And it also depicts a section of Michelangelo's famous Sistine Chapel painting, The Creation of Adam, which is a nod to our natural curiosity and desire to understand our place in the universe. And the International Geophysical Year came at a time when the Soviet Union and the US were locked in a heated race to be the first nation to go to space. And the Soviet Union succeeded on the 4th of October 1957, when Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite, was launched into low Earth orbit. And the satellite survived just under 3 months in space before falling back to Earth and burning up in our atmosphere. And the Soviet Union issued its first Sputnik stamp, which you can see there on the bottom left, on the 4th of November 1957. And the 40 kopeck perforated stamp was a simple design. It's blue and grey in colour. And as you can see, it's illustrating the satellite orbiting the Earth. And the launch of Sputnik has been celebrated globally on stamps, including Romania, Cuba, and Korea. And after the successful launch of Laika, the space dog, aboard Sputnik 2 on the 3rd of November 1957, there she is on the stamp. A further triumph came for the Soviet Union on the 12th of April 1961, when Yuri Gagarin was launched aboard Vostok 1 and orbited the Earth for 108 minutes before he returned to Earth. And Gagarin was the first man in space and the first man to orbit the Earth. And not one to shy away from celebrating their achievements through philately, a plethora of stamps from the Soviet Union commemorating this momentous event exists, including this rather wonderful 10 kopeck stamp you can see there on the right hand side, a great example of Soviet space propaganda, illustrating Gagarin looking to the stars as Vostok 1 shoots off into the sky above a silhouetted skyline, and you can see the date of the launch there in the rocket's wake. I really like that stamp, I think it's fantastic. So while the Soviet Union blazed the trail into space, the USA was successful in their own first, and on the 20th of July 1969, the crew of Apollo 11 were the first to land on the moon in their lunar module, the Eagle, and Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin stepped onto the moon on the 21st of July. And needless to say, there was an explosion in the issue of stamps and memorabilia celebrating this milestone, and you can see here on the top left, the single 10-cent stamp, which was issued in September 1969, was designed by a guy called Paul Corley. And, this was issued to celebrate this mankind's historic visit to our celestial neighbor. And it illustrates Neil Armstrong setting foot on the moon, embarking from Eagle, the lunar lander. And the engraving plates for the postage stamps, or the postage stamp, it was actually carried to the surface of the moon by the Apollo 11 astronauts, and it now resides in the National Postal Museum in Washington, D.C. And you may be wondering, well, who is Paul Corley? Well, he was one of the first 8 artists chosen by NASA in 1962 to document the American space program's Project Mercury. He's had an incredible space art career spanning more than 40 years. He's covered Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and space shuttle missions. And he was the only artist present with the Apollo 11 crew on the morning of July 16th, 1969, as they prepared for the historic launch to the moon. And in 1989, for the 20th anniversary of the moon landing, the Postal Service asked Paul's son Chris, who's also a very famous space artist and stamp designer, but they asked him to design the $2.40 priority mail stamp, and Paul to design the first day cover cachet for the issue, and which you can see there on the left hand side. I'm very lucky to have this in my collection, and it's been signed by both of them. And in 1994, for the 25th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing, Paul and Chris jointly designed 2 US stamps commemorating the event. So on the right there, we have a 29-cent commemorative stamp, and on the left then we have a $9.95 express mail stamp. So just a few more slides to go. And the past couple of years have been no exception to the issue of Apollo 11 stamps. To commemorate the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, the United States Postal Service issued 2 vertical forever stamps on the 20th of July 2019. Very simple design, as you can see. The images depict the iconic photograph of Buzz Aldrin taken by Neil Armstrong. And on the right there, we have the Apollo 11 landing site on the moon, which is the Sea of Tranquility, and you can see that's been marked with a dot. And the Isle of Man Post Office kept the Apollo theme going in 2019 with some beautiful stamps. They released a set of 8 fantastic stamps to commemorate the 50th anniversary of man landing on the moon. And One Small Step explores 50 years of lunar exploration, and it tells a story of the first 12 Apollo missions. And they depict famous images, including mission control at NASA. We've got Earthrise, taken by William Anders during the Apollo 8 mission, and the first footprints on the moon. And I just absolutely love the details of these stamps, because around the perforations of each stamp are famous quotes from people involved in the missions, including President Kennedy and the astronauts. And each features the map coordinates of a place relating to the theme of each stamp. So for example, here, this Project Apollo stamp, it displays on the bottom left vertical the coordinates of the Rice Stadium, where Kennedy delivered his speech announcing the Apollo program in 1962. And on the right hand vertical there, we have his famous quote, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade." Okay, so the future. So just quickly, you've seen that the celebration and commemoration of astronomical achievements, technological advancements and discoveries have produced an endless amount of stamps, covers and postmarks. We've got some real fantastic space events to look forward to. Our Perseverance is already up there, but hopefully we'll have James Webb Telescope launching this year, and ESA Solar Orbiter, which has already been launched, and I think it's making its close approach to the sun in November. And yeah, it's a really exciting time for Philately. I aim to promote it and teach it as much as I can. And yeah, just to give you some examples of some of the postmarks that have come out recently, including the launch there at Cape Canaveral, and a really interesting custom cover there on the bottom right hand side. And how to get started? Well, very simple and quite obvious. Just start researching on the internet. If you've seen some stamps that you like, just Google them. There's auction websites. We've got eBay, a website called Delcamp, and another one called Colnect, which is absolutely fantastic. So for example, if you wanted to look at some Halley Comet stamps, if you type that into any of those auction websites, you will literally have hundreds to choose from. And join an Astronomy Stamp Society. So I'm the Society Ambassador for the Astrospace Stamp Society. We've got about 60 members worldwide. We produce a magazine every 3 or 4 months. And yeah, and it's just packed full of information. It's usually about 40 or 50 pages long, and it just solely focuses on astronomy themed and space themed stamps and covers. We've got the American Topical Association, again, fantastic. And we've got the American Philatelic Society, and books and catalogues. I mean, we've got these 2 books down here on the bottom right, The Race to the Moon, Chronicled in Stamps, Postcards and Postmarks by Umberto Cavallaro, and Stamping Through Astronomy, which is one of my favorite books. It's absolutely brilliant, by Renato Ducati. And yeah, Stanley Gibbons produce stamp catalogues every year, so plenty out there to get you interested and get you started. And magazines too, lots of magazines. If you pop to WH Smith, there's probably a selection of about maybe 4 or 5, so grab one. And thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed my talk, and if you'd like to get in touch, please do. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Katrin. Could I stop sharing your screen?
Sure, and I'll start my video.
And
I hope you're still with me.
we are still with you. As you've been speaking, I can tell you that the numbers have gone up as well.
Oh, fantastic. That's good.
Somebody got the word out.
Yeah.
Just while people are thinking about their questions, and if you don't mind, we're going to go into a question and answer.
That's fine. I hope we can answer them.
You mentioned the 1768 transit of Venus.
Yeah.
Cook's trip to Tahiti to. Well, his astronomer Charles Green came from Swinton.
Oh right, no way! I didn't know that.
He's our local hero.
Oh, okay.
Our problem is that we can't find a portrait of him.
Oh.
Because he died on the trip.
Okay. Have you tried the Royal Astronomical Society to see if they have anything?
Yeah, we've
tried everything.
And we've come up against a brick wall.
Oh no.
I did a poster several years ago illustrating it. Only the closest I got to a portrait of him was the bicentennial stamp issued by the Australian government.
Okay.
The 5 cents.
Right.
It depicts him in a green coat facing away.
Oh.
So
you can't see his face.
But But yeah, you know, he does turn up in the odd stamp, but
Okay, yeah.
we can't find a picture of him.
Oh no. Oh, well, if I ever find one, I'll let you guys know. You'll be the
Thank you
first to
very
know.
much. So
Interesting though, thank you.
so we're looking around for questions. Anybody putting a digital hand?
Paul,
Okay,
Paul, it's Phil.
It's Philip. He's not going to wait.
I'm ever so sorry. I missed the beginning of your talk, but I've got a really good excuse. I was doing some astronomy.
Oh, that's all right. It's a clear night, is it?
Well, I've just been watching SpaceX fly over Saturn at
Oh,
24
okay.
minutes past 8, so I apologise for that.
Crikey.
But
No, that's fine. It's a perfect excuse. That's
Lovely.
Okay. As long as you enjoyed it.
It's inspiration.
No, I'm just filling some time.
Okay. So John Leach was waving at me.
Right, good evening, Katrin. That was a super talk.
Oh, thank you very much.
It's an area that I've never thought of, and I've got loads of stamps. And
oh,
so have you got a favourite?
do you know what? Someone asked me this last night, and I've been thinking all day today. What's my favourite astronomy stamp? And I really can't think of one. I mean, obviously, I love the first astronomy themed stamp that was issued in Brazil.
Right.
That's fantastic. I've got that in my collection. But I mean, you know, that there are a lot out there. I really like the creative ones. I love that, you know, the one that I showed at the beginning with the moon with the thermochromic ink. I think that's fantastic. But my favourite non-astronomy stamp actually would be, I'm not sure if you guys have it in your collection, the Agatha Christie set that was issued in 2016. Yes. I just thought they were absolutely fantastic. They were so inventive because, again, you know, some of the stamps had thermochromic ink on them. So, you know, you could cover the curtain and there'd be a man standing there with a dagger behind the guy on the train, or you need a magnifying glass or even a UV light to see some of the writing on the stamp. So I thought they were ingenious. I thought they were very engaging and yeah, really got me going. But yeah, I'm gonna have to start thinking about my favorite astronomy theme stamp, you know.
It's a question that you're gonna get off.
Yeah.
Often, yeah.
Yes. And maybe I'll have that at the end and I can just bring it up on a slide then when I get asked and I can say there it is.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrin.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Katrin.
Okay, wonderful talk. I really enjoyed it. Partway through your talk, I actually realised that I had some stamps. Once the man in flight ones, and also I bought some stamps in Libya when I saw the solar eclipse there.
All right. Okay.
But you actually mentioned Bernard Schultz.
Yeah.
And I got some of his books.
Oh, okay. Oh my gosh. You must be very brainy. You must be very brainy to understand that.
And there's this one here as well.
Oh yeah. Oh, fantastic.
Yes,
I'll have to let him know.
This one here is very highly regarded, and he was the doctoral advisor for Miguel Alcubierre, who actually came up with the Alcubierre drive for like faster than light travel.
Okay. Oh my gosh. I mean, he's a fascinating character, and I did have a very embarrassing moment with him because my knowledge of cosmology is terrible, and I don't have a background in astronomy. You know, this is just something I love, and you know, I don't have a degree in it or anything. And I was like, "Oh, Bernard, can I please interview you for a magazine?" He was like, "Yeah, great." So we met for a coffee in Cardiff, and I started asking him these questions. And when he started answering them, I was like, "Oh, you know, I was literally writing 2 words. I was totally lost." I was like, "Bernard, can I just please email you the questions and you just type the answers up?" So yeah, he was very good about that. But yeah, when he started talking about black holes and you know, the event horizon and stuff like that, I was just like, okay, I'll just email you the questions. But yeah, he's lovely. I'll tell him you've got some of his books.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Katrin, how do you see the your hobby developing, and are young people going to be aware of it in this age of electronic communication?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I've had this before. I don't think stamps and postmarks will ever stop being produced. You know, there's always going to be a need for mail anyway. So generally, I think stamps will always be around. And yeah, you know, stamp collecting is associated with a certain demographic, you know, older gentlemen perhaps. But I think, like I said at the beginning, you know, with social media, it really is enjoying a boom. because people are promoting it now on different platforms. You know, you don't just have to go and buy a pack of stamps from WH Smith, and you know, even videos, blogs, and tweets and things. I mean, there's a huge community on Twitter. If you guys are on Twitter and you want to get involved, yeah, so I think it's very popular, and I, like I said, I can't see it dying off. I hope it doesn't. And yeah, and it's up to people like me and the other guys on social media, for example, to keep that interest going now, I think, and get people involved and show them that it's not boring. It's not something that older people do. You can learn from them. They are colourful and they are fun. So
the sort of access to buying stamps. I mean, I remember as a boy in the local market in Rotherham, there would be a gentleman on a Saturday standing on the market with his packets of stamps that you could go and, you know, go and spend a couple of days, and you get a packet of mixed foreign stamps, etc. But they don't seem to be, that sort of outlet doesn't seem to be there anymore.
No, I mean, when I go into a charity shop, I'll still look for stamps in the hope that someone's just dumped a load of first day covers off somewhere. And auction houses, antiques shops, they still, you know, they still have stuff like that. But generally now it is all on eBay or the other websites I mentioned, Delcamp and Colnect. They are fantastic resources. I mean, you can go on eBay now, and you know, you could buy a first day cover for a couple of quid. And some of the stuff I have bought, you know, it has been very cheap, and I think, gosh, why is it so cheap? But I just think, you know, perhaps people have inherited these things and they don't know the value, so they just want to flog it on eBay for a couple of pounds. So yeah, I would say mainly now it is probably auction websites that you have to buy the stamps from. I mean, where I live in Pontypridd, obviously Cardiff's my nearest city, and there's a antiques market there called Jacobs, and there is a guy there he solely sells first day covers and stamps, but he is so pricey though, that he's probably the only person I know really in the vicinity who's doing that.
Thank you. I'm looking around for questions. I can't see anybody. Give me a moment just to scroll through screens. Roy Gunson.
It's more of a comment. I've actually come across my Nelson stamp album.
Crikey. That looks old.
And I looked in the back, and I have recorded my collection. The last date is 19th of September 1965, and I had 1,337 stamps in my stamp album. I've not. It's been in an old drawer down here ever since.
Do you know what? I love that. Generally, when I finish a talk, the number of people who've rushed off to look out their space stamps or astronomy stamps to show at the end, it's been fantastic. And you know, people say that I've kind of inspired them to get their stamp albums back out again and have a look and things. And I think that's great. That's what I'm aiming to do. So
I'm looking around for any other questions or comments. Anybody want to share anything? And I'm not. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a brilliant talk, Katrin.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Certainly, I will be keeping a lookout for stamps to do with astronomy and space exploration. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, can we give Katrin Raynor-Evans a big Mexper and Swinton Astronomical Society? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.